She was cast out for refusing to kneel, and the mountains became her cathedral. The snow fell in silence across the blackthorn peaks, each flake a prayer that no one would answer. Kale moved through the drifts like a ghost, her bare feet leaving no trace, a skill learned in exile, where survival meant becoming invisible. Her cloak, once white as moonlight, hung in tatters from her shoulders, stained with ash and the dust of a kingdom that had declared her too weak, too defiant, too cursed to ever wear a crown. 3 years. 3 winters had carved themselves into her bones since the Alpha King's words struck like a blade. "You're too weak to be my Luna." He had meant it as mercy, she supposed. The rejection delivered publicly, before the assembled packs. Each word a hammer blow that shattered not just her place in his life, but her place in the entire hierarchy. An Omega without an Alpha's claim was nothing, disposable, dangerous, a living insult to the natural order. So they had driven her into the mountains, past the veil line, into the territories where even rogue wolves feared to hunt. But the mountains had not killed her. Instead, they had remade her. Kale's eyes, once amber, now silver-touched by some curse or gift, she no longer knew which, caught the moonlight as she moved. Around her neck hung a simple iron collar, the symbol of her exile. Except it was no longer a chain. Somewhere in these 3 years of solitude, it had become an anchor, a talisman. She had carved symbols into its surface, the crescent moon, the wolf's paw, the rune of defiance. The collar no longer meant bondage, it meant survival. Her fingers, calloused and scarred, gripped the spear she had carved from a fallen pine. The staff was crude, but effective. She had learned to hunt alone, to fight alone, to exist in the spaces between packs where the old magic still lingered, the kind of power that the civilized kingdoms had forgotten, or worse, feared. A sound froze her mid-step, not the crack of a branch or the scatter of stones. This was different. This was the ragged breathing of something wounded, something large, something royal. Kyle moved toward the sound, her body dropping low, her senses expanding. The wind carried the scent before her eyes found the shape, blood and winter cedar, leather and ash. And beneath it all, that unmistakable signature, Alpha, but not just any Alpha, King. He lay half buried in a snowdrift, his massive frame twisted at an angle that suggested a fall from the cliffs above. His silver-threaded fur, black as midnight, was soaked with blood. His left shoulder bore a wound so deep that even from a distance Kale could see the bone. His breathing came in ragged pulls, and his eyes, when they opened, held the particular glaze of a man slipping between consciousness and the void. For a moment, Kyle did not move. She simply watched him, this creature of power reduced to mortality, this symbol of hierarchy broken and bleeding into the snow. She recognized him immediately. The face had visited her nightmares for 3 years. Aemon Blackthorn. The Alpha King, who had rejected her. The man whose words had rewritten her entire existence. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. His eyes flickered toward her, and for a moment something almost like recognition crossed his face. But his gaze was unfocused, his consciousness fracturing. He did not see Kale the woman. He saw only a shape, a shadow. Perhaps, in his delirium, he saw death coming for him at last. "Please," he whispered, his voice hoarse and raw. "Don't. Let them find me like this." Kyle's grip tightened on her spear. The logical choice was simple. Walk away. Let the mountains finish what his enemies had started. Let the snow take him, as it had so nearly taken her. Justice, after all, was a patient thing. But as she watched the blood pool beneath him, as she felt the cold radiating from his wound, something in her, something she thought she had burned away in exile, stirred. It was not mercy, not yet. It was something older, something that recognized a fellow creature marked for death, standing at the edge of oblivion. Kale moved forward, lowering her spear. She knelt in the snow beside the wounded king, her silver eyes meeting his dark ones. "I'm taking you somewhere warm," she said quietly. "Not because I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I didn't survive 3 winters in this mountain just to let someone else decide your fate." Eamon's lips curved in what might have been a smile, or perhaps it was just the grimace of a dying man. "Mercy?" he whispered. "No," Kale said, reaching down to grip his good shoulder. "Defiance. I do what I choose, not what I'm supposed to do. You taught me that, actually, when you cast me out." And as the moon rose over the Blackthorn peaks, she began the work of dragging a king through the snow toward her hidden refuge, a cave carved into the mountainside where fire still burned in a stone hearth, and the old magic still remembered how to mend broken things. The mountains had chosen their witness. Now they would watch what she chose to do with him. The cave was small, intimate in a way that made Kale acutely aware of every breath she took. Shadows danced across the stone walls as she worked, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, hands that had learned medicine from necessity, from watching wolves heal themselves in the wild, from the forbidden grimoire she had stolen from the kingdom's library before her exile. She had stripped Eamon of his bloodied armor, his shirt, everything that clung to his wound. Now he lay on a bed of furs, her bed, the only one in this place, fever burning through him like a second sun. His body moved between the worlds of consciousness and delirium, his muscled chest heaving with each labored breath. The wound was worse than she had thought. The blade that had struck him had been laced with something dark, not poison exactly, but something older, something magical. Kyle recognized the signature of forbidden craft, the kind that belonged to blood witches and those who dealt in curses. Someone had tried very hard to kill the Alpha King. She prepared a poultice of mountain herbs and snowmelt, grinding them with the heel of a stone, adding drops of her own blood. A dangerous thing, an intimate thing. But the old magic required it. The magic of the Pathfinders, the rare Omegas who could sense and channel what others could not. Magic that had been called a curse by the very man who now lay burning on her furs. Kale pressed the poultice against his shoulder, and Eamon's eyes flew open. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with terrifying strength. For a moment, she saw the predator beneath the fever, the alpha who could snap her like kindling if he chose. "Don't," she said quietly, not pulling away. "I'm healing you. Let me." Recognition flickered across his face, then faded again as the fever pulled him back under. His grip loosened, but he did not release her. Instead, his fingers curled around her wrist like an anchor, like he was drowning and she was the only solid thing left. "Who are you?" he murmured, his voice distant. "Someone you rejected," Kyle replied, pressing the poultice deeper into the wound. "Someone the mountains chose. That's all you need to know." But it wasn't all. As she worked through the night, as she bathed his forehead with cool water and whispered the old words of healing, words that burned her throat because they required power, always sacrifice, she found herself remembering. She remembered the day he had called her to the throne room, not to celebrate as she had hoped, not to crown her, but to break her. "You're too weak to be my Luna. Your bloodline is tainted. Your magic is unstable. You would bring ruin to my house." The words had fallen from his lips as though they were merely facts, merely logic, as though her heart was not shattering with each syllable, as though she had not spent her entire life preparing for this, training for this, believing in this union. The worst part was that she had understood even then that he meant it. Every word was a stone thrown by a man drowning in duty, in the weight of his crown. He was not being cruel. He was being practical. A king could not afford weakness, could not afford magic that burned too hot, could not be controlled, could not afford an Omega like her. "Amen," she whispered into the darkness, pressing her palm flat against his burning chest. She could feel his heartbeat, erratic and fighting. "Stay. Fight. You're stronger than fever." His eyes opened again, clearer now. For just a moment, the delirium lifted. "Kyle." His voice cracked with disbelief. "You're here?" She had not known he remembered her name, had not known he had ever truly seen her, not just what she represented. "I'm here," she confirmed, not understanding why she said it, why she made it sound like a promise. "You should have let me die," he whispered. "You should have let the mountain take me." "Yes," Kyle agreed, "I should have." But she didn't move away. She sat beside him through the night, her hand on his chest, her magic flowing into him like starlight, burning away the curse that wound through his veins. Each thread of dark magic she pulled from him cost her. She could feel it draining from her core, leaving her hollow, but she did not stop. Because somewhere between rejection and exile, between 3 years of solitude and this moment in a cave beneath the moon, Kale had made a choice that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with defiance. She was going to save him. Not because she forgave him, not because she loved him, but because the Omega he had declared too weak was going to prove that rejection was not the same as erasure. By dawn, the fever had broken. Eamon slept the sleep of the healing, his breathing steady, his wound beginning to close. Kale collapsed beside the fire, exhausted beyond measure, her silver eyes reflecting the flames like molten metal. The iron collar around her neck caught the light, and in its surface, new symbols seemed to glow, symbols she had not carved. Symbols that appeared when her Pathfinder magic burned brightest. The mountains were watching, and they were not surprised by what she had chosen. 3 days passed in the cave, and time moved differently there, as though the mountain itself had decided to slow the turning of the world. Eamon woke and slept in cycles, his fever breaking more with each sunrise. Kyle tended to him with the efficiency of someone who had long ago learned that sentiment was a luxury only the safe could afford. But something was shifting. On the 3rd night, Eamon woke fully for the first time. The delirium had cleared from his eyes, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous: awareness. He pushed himself up on his elbows, gasping at the pain that shot through his shoulder, then froze as he took in his surroundings. The cave was small, intimate, lit by the dying embers of a carefully tended fire. Furs and blankets covered the ground. On a stone shelf carved into the rock, herbs hung in bundles, their shadows dancing like ghosts. And kneeling beside a clay pot of water, her silver eyes watching him with neither warmth nor hostility, was a woman he had spent 3 years trying not to think about. "Kyle," he said, and it was not a question. "Yes. You saved me." It was not a question either. "I did." Eamon sat up fully, gritting his teeth against the wave of pain that followed. His left shoulder was bound with clean linen, soaked in something that smelled of herbs and starlight. The wound itself, when he could see it, was already beginning to scar, too quickly, with too much precision. Why? Now that was a question, and it carried weight. Kyle remained on her knees, her head tilted slightly. In the firelight, she looked less like a woman and more like something carved from moonlight and stone, sharp, uncompromising, fundamentally wild. "Because I could," she said simply. "Because I chose to. Because the alternative was watching you die in the snow, and I haven't survived 3 years in these mountains just to miss the irony of that." Eamon's jaw tightened. He looked away, his gaze traveling across the cave, taking in the evidence of her life here. The careful organization of her supplies, the books, forbidden grimoires clearly, from the royal library. The weapons hung from hooks in the stone. The bed where he had been burning with fever and where she must have spent the past 3 days refusing to leave him. "Tell me what happened," Kyle said. "Tell me who did this to you." Eamon was silent for a long moment. Then he began to speak. "A coup," he said finally, "or an attempt at one. My beta, Ronan, decided that my rule had become too merciful, too weak. He wanted to take the throne, claim the crown for someone who would lead the Pax back to the old ways. Dominance before compassion, blood before mercy." Kyle felt something cold move through her at the name. Ronan. She had seen him once, years ago, in the kingdom, a massive alpha with eyes like chips of obsidian, a warrior carved from violence and ambition. "The wound?" she prompted. "A trap. I was hunting near the Veil line when he came at me with his guard. We fought, but there were too many. He used a blade laced with witchcraft, the kind that doesn't kill quickly, the kind that makes you slow enough to be caught." Aemon's voice was steady, but Cale could hear the ghost of pain beneath it. "I fell from the cliff to escape them. Would have died if—" He stopped, his dark eyes finding hers. "If you hadn't found me." "Yes. Why didn't you kill me?" The question was raw, honest. "You had every right. I destroyed your life, Kyle. I cast you out. I condemned you to exile in these mountains, and you saved me instead." Kyle stood, moving to the fire to stir the pot of broth she had been keeping warm. The movement was deliberate, bought her time to consider how to answer. "Because weakness and strength aren't what you think they are," she said finally. "I learned that when I was alone. I learned that mercy and defiance are the same thing when they're a choice instead of an order. I learned that I didn't need your approval or your crown. I just needed to survive. And I did." She ladled broth into a cup carved from stone and held it out to him. "You said I was too weak to be your Luna, but you were wrong. I was always strong enough. You were too weak to recognize it." Aemon took the cup, but he did not drink. He simply held it, studying her face, the sharp cheekbones, the silver eyes that seemed to contain their own light, the iron collar around her throat that she wore like a queen wore a crown. "The collar," he said. "They told me it was a mark of your exile, a symbol of shame." "It was," Cale said quietly. "Now it's a symbol of something else, of survival, of defiance, of the fact that I made my own meaning out of their judgment." Aemon finally drank the broth. Color was beginning to return to his face, strength flowing back into his body. By tomorrow, he would be strong enough to stand. The day after, strong enough to fight. "When I'm healed," he said slowly, "they'll come looking for me. Ronan will need to be sure I'm dead, or he won't rest easy on the throne. I know. And when they come, they'll find you. They'll see an Omega living alone in exile with the king they're hunting. I know that too." Aemon set the cup down. His eyes were clearer now, sharper, and they held something that looked almost like the weight of a kingdom. "Will you fight with me?" he asked. "When the time comes?" Kyle moved to the window carved into the cave where the moon was rising over the mountains, silver and cold and beautiful. "I'll do what I choose," she said. "Same as always. The rest remains to be seen." Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. By the 5th day, Aemon could stand. By the 6th, he could move without pain lancing through his shoulder. The wound had closed with an impossible speed, leaving behind a silver scar that seemed to shimmer in the firelight, the mark of Pathfinder magic, the kind that saved and bound in equal measure. He spent those days learning about the woman Cale had become. She showed him the grimoire she had stolen, filled with the old magic, the kind that predated the organized packs, the kind that belonged to the wild places. She taught him the routes through the mountains, the hidden passages that could move a person from one kingdom to another without detection. She showed him the weapons she had crafted, spears, bows, knives honed to lethal precision against stone. And she taught him to fight like she fought, not like a king, like a survivor. "Your technique is too formal," she told him on the 6th day, as they sparred in the larger chamber of the cave. She moved like water, like wind, attacking from angles he had never considered, too bound by the rules of honorable combat. Kings fight with honor because they have kingdoms to lose. We fight to survive. Different thing entirely. Aemon caught her spear on an old wooden staff he had carved from a fallen tree, using the momentum to redirect her assault. But she was already moving, already spinning, already behind him. "You're distracted," she said, "thinking about the throne, about Ronan, about what happens when you leave this cave. Don't. There's only the moment. There's only the next strike." They moved through the cave like that for hours, until sweat dripped from both their bodies and their breathing came in ragged pulls. Aemon had been trained from childhood to be a warrior king, but Chaol fought like the mountains themselves, fierce, uncompromising, operating from some deeper understanding of power than mere strength or technique. When they finally stopped, collapsing on the furs beside the fire, Aemon could not help the laugh that escaped him. "What?" Chaol asked, her silver eyes suspicious. "3 years ago, I rejected you because I thought you were too soft to rule," he said. "I can see now how wrong I was." Chaol did not smile. She rarely did. But something shifted in her expression, a softening that might have been approval or might have been something more dangerous. "You rejected me because you were afraid," she corrected. "Afraid of what my magic meant. Afraid of what it meant to have an Omega who wouldn't bow. Afraid of a strength that didn't look like dominance." "Yes," Aemon admitted, and the word carried the weight of 3 years' burden. "I was afraid, and my fear cost you everything." "It cost me my old life," Chaol agreed. "It didn't cost me myself. I found that in the mountains." She stood, moving to the shelf where her grimoire lay. When she returned, she held it open to a passage marked with dried moonflower. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. "About your beta, about why he chose this moment to move against you. It's not just ambition. Ronan is working with someone else, someone with magic, someone who wants both of us dead." Aemon felt ice move through his veins. "Who?" "I don't know the name," Chaol said, "but I can feel them. It's a magic like mine, Pathfinder magic, but twisted, corrupted. They were the one who cursed your wound. I think. Testing it. Seeing if it would kill you or if you were strong enough to survive." "A test," Aemon repeated slowly, "which means they knew you might find me." "Which means," Chaol continued, "that they know what I am, what we both are, and they're planning for something larger than just a coup." She turned to face him fully, and in the firelight, her silver eyes seemed to contain entire storms. "When you leave this cave," she said, "you can't go back to the throne unprepared. Ronan is only part of this. There's something bigger moving in the shadows, something that wants to use your civil war as cover for something else." Aemon stood, his healing shoulders steady now. The king in him was already moving, already thinking in strategies and alliances, but the man who had watched this woman save his life, teach him, fight beside him, was looking at her with something that looked dangerously like the beginning of understanding. "If I go back," he said slowly, "if I reclaim my throne, I'll need someone beside me, someone who knows the old magic, someone who can sense threats I can't." "No," Chaol said immediately. "I won't come back to the kingdom. I won't go back to being property, even if you crown me." "I know," Aemon said, "but I'm not asking you to be property. I'm asking you to be an ally, a partner, someone who chooses to fight beside me, not because she has to, but because we're both hunting the same enemy." Chaol moved to the window again, where the moon was setting over the mountains. The first light of dawn was beginning to touch the eastern sky. "Let's see if you survive what's coming first," she said. "Then we can talk about partners." But even as she said it, her hand moved to the iron collar around her neck, and her fingers traced the symbols she had carved there, the symbols that had begun to glow with her own starlight. The mountains were waiting, and they had chosen to bind their fates together, whether either of them had fully accepted it yet. On the 7th day, riders came. Kyle sensed them first, felt them moving through the mountain passes like a plague of locusts, felt the wrongness of their intentions like smoke in her lungs. She stood at the cave entrance before dawn, her spear in hand, her silver eyes fixed on the paths below. 20 of them, she said, as Aemon joined her. His shoulder was healed now, his body remembering how to move as a predator should. Led by someone I recognize, the warrior from the kingdom, your Beta's lieutenant. Gareth, Aemon confirmed, his voice low and dangerous. He was the one who drove you out. Yes, Kale said flatly. I remember him. The riders appeared on the mountain trail like ghosts made flesh, moving with the coordinated precision of men trained for war. They carried torches, a deliberate choice meant to drive whoever was hiding in the cave into the open. Your people, Kyle said. Do you recognize the banner? The Black Wolf, Aemon confirmed. It's Ronan's mark. He's already established enough control to send his own hunters. Kale moved deeper into the cave, gesturing for Aemon to follow. She led him to a passage he had not noticed before, narrow, carved by water and time, leading downward into darkness. There's a way out through the lower caves, she explained as they walked. It takes you 3 leagues south, exits near the Veiled River. But if you take it, you leave me here alone. No, Aemon said immediately. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. You're still healing, Kyle pointed out. 20 warriors. I'm a king, Aemon interrupted, and there was something in his voice that reminded her why men had followed him, why he had once worn the crown unchallenged. And I'm done running from my own people. If Ronan wants my throne, he's going to have to kill me for it. And if he wants to hurt you, he's going to have to go through me first. Kyle felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and warm and entirely unwelcome. You realize that sounds like you're choosing me, she said quietly. I'm choosing to fight, Aemon corrected, and the only way to win is to make a stand. The only place I'm strong enough to do that is here, with you, with magic on my side. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved back toward the cave entrance, Aemon following. They emerged as the sun touched the mountainside, as the 20 riders approached the cave. Gareth rode at their head, his armor gleaming in the dawn light. When he saw Aemon, his face twisted into something between shock and triumph. The king lives, he called out, his voice carrying across the stone. How fortunate. Ronan will pay well for your corpse, dead or alive. I'm sure he will, Aemon replied, his voice calm. But you won't be the one collecting the reward. Gareth's eyes shifted to Kale, and his expression darkened with recognition. The cast-off Omega, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You still live? How disappointing. I was so certain the mountains would have finished you by now. Kale stepped forward, and in her movement was all the power of 3 years of survival, all the magic of the wild places, all the defiance of a woman remade by solitude and stars. I'm going to give you one chance, she said quietly, her silver eyes blazing. You can ride away. Tell Ronan that you found nothing but empty caves. Tell him the king is dead, that the mountains took us both. Or you can stay, and I'll show you what weak looks like when she's learned to fight. Gareth laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the stone. 1 woman and a wounded king against 20 armed warriors. You're more pathetic than I remember. He drew his sword, the signal for the others to charge. Kyle had already expected this. She had spent 6 days preparing for this, studying the warriors' movements from the cave entrance, learning their patterns and weaknesses. She had carved symbols into the stone around the cave mouth, ancient symbols, the kind that bent magic to her will. As the warriors charged, the earth itself seemed to shift. The mountain path cracked beneath their horses' hooves, sending half a dozen riders tumbling. The stone walls amplified sound, turning the roar of horses into something that confused and disoriented. Kyle moved through it like a dancer, her spear finding weak points in armor, her magic burning paths of starlight through the darkness. Aemon fought beside her, and together they were something more than the sum of their parts, something that remembered, perhaps, what it meant to be a matched pair, meant to face the world as one. But it was Chaol who faced Gareth. They met on the widest part of the ledge, her spear against his sword, her magic against his training. And for the first time, Gareth saw what the kingdom had lost when they cast her out. He saw strength, he saw rage, he saw everything he had been counting on her lacking. It took her 3 minutes to disarm him, 4 to bring him to his knees, 5 to give him the same choice she had given him at the beginning: walk away or die. Gareth chose to walk away when the surviving riders had fled. Racing down the mountain path like demons were chasing them, Aemon and Chaol stood together in the dawn light, breathing hard, covered in the dust and blood of victory. "That's the second time you've defied the kingdom's expectation of what weakness means," Aemon said quietly. Kyle turned to look at him, her silver eyes catching the light. "It won't be the last," she said. "Ronan will come himself now, and whoever is behind him will make their move." "I know," Aemon said, "but we'll face them together, you and I. The Omega, they said, was too weak, and the king, they said, was too merciful. Maybe that's what was needed all along." Chaol moved to the edge of the ledge, looking out over the mountains, the place that had remade her. "We should leave," she said. "Get to the capital before Ronan can move against you openly. Gather allies." "Yes," Aemon agreed. "But first, there's something I need to say." He moved beside her, his dark eyes reflecting the morning light. "I was wrong," he said simply, "about your strength, about your value, about what it meant to be Luna. I was wrong about all of it. And I spent 3 years regretting the moment I cast you out. Now I'm asking, not as a king but as a man, if you can ever forgive me enough to walk beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, beside me." Chaol was quiet for a long moment. The iron collar around her neck caught the light, and the symbols seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "First, we survive. Then we'll discuss what comes after." But as they prepared to leave the cave, to descend from the mountains and return to the world of thrones and wars and magic, Aemon could not help but notice that Chaol did not let him out of her sight. That when they walked, she stayed beside him, not behind. The mountains released them with the blessing of the dawn, and somewhere in the lower lands, Ronan was discovering that his most dangerous enemy had not died in the snow. He had been reborn. The capital of Blackthorn sprawled across a valley like a dark jewel, its towers piercing the morning sky like fangs. Aemon and Chaol approached from the eastern pass, riding stolen horses they had commandeered from the knights who had ambushed them. They arrived as dusk fell, the city's banners now hanging upside down, the symbol of a kingdom in mourning for a dead king. Ronan had not wasted time. The throne had already been claimed, but the people knew Aemon was alive. Kyle could feel it in the energy of the city, the whispers moving through the streets like a living thing. The man who was supposed to be dead, killed by curse and cliff and mountain, had returned. The question was no longer whether he would reclaim his throne. The question was whether he could reclaim it before his enemies struck with everything they had. They took refuge in the Temple of the Moon, a sanctuary so old that predated the current kingdom by centuries. The high priestess, a silver-haired woman named Celia, who had once been close to the previous king, provided them with shelter and information. "Ronan is paranoid," Celia explained as they sat in the temple's inner sanctum, lit by candles that burned with cold flame. "He's reinforced the throne room with protective wards. He's gathering the heads of the other houses, trying to legitimize his rule. But the people are restless. They remember Aemon. They remember mercy. What about the magic user? Kyle asked. The pathfinder who cursed my wound? Celia's expression shifted, becoming guarded. There are rumors. Some speak of a seer from the Eastern Territories. Someone with power to reshape fate itself. But I don't know for certain. Kale felt something cold move through her. A seer. Someone whose magic was not about healing or defending, but about seeing all possible futures and choosing which one to make real. That was a threat on a different scale entirely. We need to move quickly, Aemon said, before this seer makes whatever move they've been planning. But that night, everything changed. Ronan issued a challenge, traditional combat, the kind that settled succession disputes among the great packs. Aemon versus Ronan, with the throne going to the victor. Winner take all. It was a trap, of course. Kyle knew it immediately, but Aemon did not seem surprised. It's the only way, he told her as they prepared for the combat. If I don't face him, the kingdom tears itself apart with uncertainty. If I do, at least there's a clear resolution. Clear resolution? Kale's voice was sharp. Ronan has had weeks to gather resources, to fortify himself with magic. You're walking into an ambush. I know, Aemon said quietly. But you taught me something in those caves. You taught me that real strength is about making choices, not avoiding them. This is my choice. To stand, to fight, to reclaim what's mine. He took her hands, and Kale was struck by how warm they were, how steady. I need you to do something for me, he said. I need you to be ready. When the moment comes, when everything seems lost, I need you to remember what you are. You're a pathfinder, Kyle. You can see the threads of magic in ways others can't. When Ronan tries to use whatever witchcraft has been arranged, I need you to cut those threads. You're asking me to break the rules, Kale said, to interfere in the combat. I'm asking you to save my life, Aemon corrected. The rules stopped mattering the moment someone decided a legitimate combat could be corrupted with curse magic. The arena was set in the central square of the capital, surrounded by thousands of witnesses. The high houses gathered in the judgment stands. The people pressed against the barriers, their eyes hungry for resolution. Ronan stood on one side of the arena floor, his body massive and scarred, his eyes burning with ambition. Aemon stood on the other side, healed, but still bearing the silver scar from Kale's magic. And Kale stood in the Temple of the Moon, hidden in shadow, her hand pressed against an iron mirror, a tool that let her see across distances, that let her follow the threads of magic unfolding in the arena below. The combat began. Aemon moved like water, his technique refined by 3 years of ruling and centuries of training. Ronan moved like an avalanche, brutal and overwhelming. They matched each other for the first minutes, blow for blow, parry for thrust. The crowd roared, uncertain who held the advantage. But as the combat progressed, Kale began to see the threads. Dark threads, woven through Ronan's muscles, burning through his veins. Magic designed to enhance strength, to increase endurance, to make him nearly unstoppable. And beneath those threads, something else. A seer's work. Magic designed to ensure that Ronan could not lose, that no matter what Aemon did, he would find himself at a disadvantage. Kale began to weave her own magic, her silver power moving like silk through the darkness, finding the threads of corruption, cutting them one by one. It was dangerous. Pathfinder magic in direct opposition could explode, could tear apart the magical fabric of the kingdom itself. But Kale had learned precision in the mountains. She had learned to make choices that mattered. She began to cut. In the arena, Ronan suddenly stumbled. His strength, so overwhelming a moment before, wavered. Aemon pressed the advantage, driving his opponent backward. The crowd erupted in confusion. Had they been favoring the wrong side? Was their king not as dead as they had been told? Ronan's eyes blazed with fury as he realized something was wrong. He drew a dagger from his belt. Not a clean weapon, but one dripping with venom and curse. He raised it to strike a killing blow, forsaking the honor of the combat for the certainty of victory. And Cale cut the final thread. Ronan's arm seized mid-motion. Aemon saw the opening and moved with the precision of a man who had trained his entire life for this moment. His blade found Ronan's heart, clean and swift. The beta fell. The kingdom held its breath. Then Aemon knelt, his blade still in his hand, and spoke the ritual words of the victor. The throne was his once more. The kingdom was his to command, but as he stood, his dark eyes sought out the temple, seeking out Cale, and the priestess beside him, Celia, smiled. "She gave you the victory," the priestess said quietly. "The daughter of the mountains, the one you cast out." "I know," Aemon said. His voice was heavy with the weight of understanding. "I always knew she would be stronger than me. I just needed to have the courage to let her prove it." Later, when Aemon returned to the temple, Kyle was waiting in the sanctum, her silver eyes reflecting candlelight. "It's done," he said simply. "The throne is mine. The kingdom is stable. But it means nothing if you're not beside me." Kyle moved toward him, and her movements carried the grace of someone who had learned to walk between worlds. "I need something from you first," she said. "Anything. I need you to acknowledge what happened in that arena. I need you to acknowledge that you won because I let you win. That magic, my magic, decided the outcome." Aemon was quiet. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said, "I won because you made it possible. And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that strength and weakness are not what the old rules said they were." Kyle reached up and touched his face, her calloused fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Comment Luna, if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth," she said softly, the words like a spell. "I'd do more than that," Aemon replied. "I'd turn the kingdom upside down for you. I'd burn it to the ground and rebuild it in your image." "I know," Kyle said. "That's why I'm going to let you try." 3 months passed between the moment Kyle placed her hand on Aemon's face in the Temple of the Moon and the coronation that would bind their fates together. 3 months of preparation, of the kingdom learning who she was, of ancient magic being woven into new laws and new structures. Aemon changed everything. He abolished the hierarchy that had deemed Omegas weak. He created councils where pathfinders could use their magic openly. He opened the royal libraries to everyone, not just the chosen few. And in all of it, Cale's influence moved like a current beneath the surface, reshaping what it meant to be ruled. But not everyone was happy. The old families resisted. The high houses that had built their power on the dominance hierarchy fought against every change. And somewhere, the seer who had worked with Ronan remained alive, planning their next move. Kyle knew this. She could feel the threads of dark magic gathering in the shadows, weaving patterns she did not yet understand. On the night before the coronation, she stood in the tower chamber that would be her own once the ceremony was complete. The room was high enough to see across the entire kingdom, its windows open to the night sky. The moon was full, bleeding red light across the stone. Aemon found her there, standing at the window, her iron collar reflecting the crimson light. "You're afraid," he said. "Not as an observation, but as a statement of fact." "I'm terrified," Kyle corrected. "Crowns come with targets. They come with enemies. They come with complications I don't think either of us has fully considered." Aemon moved beside her, his dark eyes studying her profile. "The seer is still out there," he said quietly. "The priestess told me. Someone with power to reshape destiny itself. And they've been working against us since the beginning." "I know," Kyle said. "I can feel them. They're waiting for something, waiting for a moment when they can strike and change everything. Then we're ready for them." "Are we?" Kyle turned to look at him. "Are we really? You're a king learning to rule without the old hierarchy. I'm an Omega wearing a crown that doesn't exist yet. We're both still learning what we are. And somewhere, someone is waiting for us to be weak enough to break. Eamon took her hands, and she was struck again by how warm they were, how steady. I've been weak before, he said. I was weak when I rejected you. I was weak when I let fear rule my choices. But I'm not weak now, and neither are you. Whatever the seer brings, we face it together. That's a lovely sentiment, Kale said, but sentiment doesn't stop dark magic. No, Eamon agreed. But you do. You're a pathfinder, Kale. You can see threads that others are blind to. You can weave magic in ways that reshape reality. If anyone can stop a seer, it's you. Kale turned back to the window, looking out at the kingdom that would soon be as much her responsibility as his. In the cave, she said quietly, I made a choice. Not to let you die. Not because I forgave you, but because I believed in defiance. I believed in choosing my own path. Tomorrow, when I wear a crown, that choice becomes public. It becomes something that others have to accept, have to live with. It becomes real in a way it hasn't been yet. I know, Eamon said. If I do this, Kyle continued, if I become Luna, I'm making a promise. Not to you specifically, to the kingdom, to everyone who was taught that I'm weak, that I'm broken, that I shouldn't exist. I'm promising that I'm going to change their world. Yes, Eamon said, and you will. Kyle finally smiled, a rare thing, sharp and dangerous and full of promise. Then we should prepare, she said. The seer won't wait for us to become secure in our new positions. They'll strike soon, when everything is still fragile, still new. Tomorrow, Eamon said, taking her hand and leading her away from the window. Tomorrow we become what the old world feared. Tomorrow we prove that mercy and strength aren't opposites. They're the same thing, seen from different angles. As they descended from the tower, the moon continued to bleed red light across the stone. And somewhere in the shadows, the seer opened their eyes. The game, they knew, was about to enter a new phase. The Omega and the King were no longer outcasts learning to survive. They were about to become something far more dangerous, rulers. The coronation was a spectacle that reverberated through the kingdom like a bell struck by heaven itself. Thousands gathered in the grand cathedral, a structure so ancient that its foundations predated the current dynasty by centuries. The walls were hung with silver cloth, and candlelight danced across them like captured stars. The high priestess Celia led the ceremony, her voice carrying the weight of generations of magic. Eamon was crowned first, no surprises there, no breaking of tradition. The crown of blackthorn settled onto his dark hair, and when he rose from his knees, he was unmistakably king. The people bowed, their acceptance absolute. But then came Kael. She wore white, not the white of tradition, but the white of the mountains, of snow and starlight. Her iron collar had been replaced with something new, a circlet of silver and iron, forged from the metal of her exile and transformed into something that glittered like captured moonlight. Her silver eyes were steady as she knelt before the altar. Kael of the mountains, Celia said, her voice carrying through the cathedral. You who were cast out, do you accept the crown of Luna? Do you accept the burden of these people, the responsibility of this kingdom? Kyle looked up, and in her gaze was everything she had learned in her exile. Strength born from survival, mercy earned through pain, power that knew its own limits because it had tested them against stone and ice and the unyielding earth. I do, she said, and the words carried magic. The very stones of the cathedral seemed to resonate with her acceptance. As Celia placed the crown upon her head, something extraordinary happened. The light in the cathedral shifted, becoming neither day nor night, but something in between. The moon, impossible, present in daylight, appeared in the sky outside the windows, and as it did, every person in the cathedral felt it. The magic of the Pathfinder, acknowledged and accepted by the kingdom itself. Aemon took her hand as she rose, and together they turned to face their people. The assembled nobility, the high houses, the common folk who had been allowed to witness this moment, all of them knelt. But in the shadows of the cathedral, something else happened. A figure emerged from the darkness, robed and crowned with stars that burned like ice. The seer, the one who had cursed Aemon, who had worked with Ronan, who had been waiting for this moment when all the magic of the kingdom would be gathered in one place. "The Omega ascends," the seer said, their voice echoing through the cathedral like a prophecy. How fitting, how perfectly ironic. "You've been moving the pieces toward your own destruction. I've been waiting for you to complete the pattern." Chaos erupted. Knights moved to protect the new rulers. The nobility scattered. But Chaol simply stood still, her hand in Aemon's, her silver eyes fixed on the seer. She could see the threads now, threads of magic so complex they hurt to look at, woven by hands that understood fate itself. The seer had been working toward this moment not to stop the coronation, but to use it, to harvest the power that had been released when a pathfinder claimed a crown. "You think you know how this ends," Chaol said quietly, stepping forward. "You think you can reshape destiny." "I don't think," the seer replied. "I know. I've seen every possible future. In all of them, you fail." "Have you seen the one where I choose something different?" Chaol asked, and as she spoke, she reached up and touched her crown, the crown forged from her exile and her defiance. The iron sang under her fingers, and from it, silver light erupted. It was different from the magic she had used in the cave. This was magic amplified by coronation, enhanced by acceptance, magnified by the weight of a kingdom giving its consent. This was magic that did not simply heal or defend. This was magic that chose. Chaol's power moved through the cathedral like starlight given form, and as it did something the seer had never expected. It offered a choice, not death or defeat, not victory or surrender, but a choice. "Come with us," Chaol said to the seer. "Come help rebuild. Come use your power to see not just what will be, but what could be. Stop trying to force a single future and help create one worth living." The seer recoiled, and in their recoil, Chaol understood something fundamental. The seer was terrified of choice. They had spent so long seeing futures that they had forgotten how to live in the present. They had traded their agency for the illusion of certainty. But in that moment, something shifted in the seer's perception. They saw, perhaps for the first time, a future they had not foreseen. A world where they were not alone, where their power was used not to control, but to illuminate possibility. The seer fell to their knees. "I don't know how to choose," they whispered. "None of us do," Chaol said, extending her hand. "We learn, we practice, we fail and try again. Join us, help us figure it out." In the silence of the cathedral, with the impossible moon shining through the windows and the crowned rulers standing with offered hands, something fundamentally changed in the kingdom. The seer took Chaol's hand. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom adjusted to its new reality. An Omega as Luna, a pathfinder wielding the power of the throne, a king who had chosen mercy over dominance. It should have been impossible. It should have led to chaos. Instead, it led to transformation. The old families who resisted found their power gently but firmly reduced. The laws changed. The hierarchy collapsed. In its place grew something new. A kingdom where strength was measured not by dominance, but by the ability to effect change, by the willingness to be vulnerable, by the courage to choose defiance when defiance was necessary. On a clear night, 1 month after the coronation, Aemon and Chaol stood together in the tower chamber that had once been her refuge and was now their shared sanctuary. "I have a confession," Aemon said quietly. Chaol turned to him, her silver eyes catching the moonlight. When you were in exile, he continued, I was dying. Not from the curse, though that was real enough, but from the knowledge of what I had done. From the understanding that I had cast away the one thing that could have made me human instead of just a king. It took 3 years and a death sentence to finally teach me what you were trying to tell me all along. And what was that? Kale asked. That strength isn't about dominance, Aemon said. That weakness isn't the opposite of power. That love, real love, is about choosing to be vulnerable with someone you trust completely. He took her hand and placed something small and silver in her palm. A ring, forged from the same metal as her circlet, inscribed with the runes of binding and choice. I'm not asking you to be my Luna because it's your duty, he said. I'm asking you to stay because I've learned that defiance looks beautiful on you, and I want to spend my life learning what that looks like when it's directed toward building something instead of surviving it. Kale looked at the ring, then at him, and in her eyes was everything she had learned in the mountains, the knowledge that choosing to love someone you could hate was the bravest thing a person could do. I'll think about it, she said, echoing the words she had spoken in the cave, what now felt like a lifetime ago. But this time, she was already smiling. That's all I ask, Aemon replied. And as the moon rose over the kingdom, no longer bleeding red, no longer filled with omen, but simply beautiful and whole, the Omega and the King stood together in the tower, 2 flawed and broken creatures who had learned that mercy and defiance were the same thing when wielded by the right hands. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.